Well, Mr. Moll, you've retired now almost 20 years.
Yes, 20 years next August.
And how many years were you headmaster?
29.
29. And did you enjoy your time as headmaster on the whole, or is that a word you would use about your
Yes, I think I would use it. You know, what does enjoy mean? I can't say for at all. I don't think any schoolmaster would, that I had the greatest amount of pleasure every single second of every single day. But by and large, the good times far outnumbered the not so good times.
Right. Well, most teachers enjoy the extracurricular activities, and you encourage the extracurricular activities very conscientiously. Did you feel that you were contributing to the pupils' development?
Oh yes, I think so. One of the great developments in education as a whole over the last century is the way in which the responsibility which schools have taken has grown. There was a time when a school was expected to teach learning in the more narrow sense. But as the century has gone on, and particularly after the Second World War, more and more responsibility has been taken over. As I mentioned once upon a time in that report that I showed you just now,
yes.
Increasingly we can say that schools found themselves in loco parentis.
Yes.
And many things schools accepted some responsibility for, along with parents, not replacing parents, but along with parents. And I think most educationists now would say that they must take some responsibility for the total development of pupils, not just for their intellectual development.
Well, where did that idea come from, do you think?
It's interesting. Again, I suppose at the beginning of the century, one would have said that the three main influences on children were home, church and school.
Yes.
That is still true. There's community as well, of course. But at a time there was almost a certain, I was going to use the word jealousy, that's a bit strong I think, but each of those three departments were a bit inclined, each one was a bit inclined to feel that it should be left alone. The home didn't like too much interference from the school. And as between the school and the church, there wasn't always the amount of cooperation that maybe there should have been.
Yes.
As time has gone on, I think the feeling has grown that it is really a combination of all three, rather than each one working separately, which is required.
I think I got my social life, you see, from school.
Yes.
In my day.
Yes.
Activities really were beginning to develop at that stage.
Yes.
But even the earlier pupils I've talked to seem to get a certain amount of social life from school as well.
Yes.
But there were various activities, drama and music and games, etc. Would you have had a favourite among those activities?
Oh, I don't think so. My feeling was that all these activities have something to contribute. If you mean by that, was I happier in dealing with any one thing more than another? Well, I suppose that's true. I've always liked music, liked listening to music, but I'm no musician. Yes. I can't play an instrument, I can't sing in any real sense of the term, nor in fact have I any great dramatic ability myself. I did do a little bit of dramatic work when I was at college, as most of us do, but I had no real skill, so that from the point of view of my own personal preference, it would be true to say that I was more interested in games than in any of the others. But from the point of view, if you mean what did I think was more important in education, which should get more attention in the development of pupils, then I would say no favourite.
No, it's just I seem to remember you when the week the play was on.
Yes.
You walked about with a great air of happiness and your eyes shining, and you were very interested, you know, and when the concert was on too, but then the concert only maybe was on one day, but we had a whole week of play and you were everywhere in the little room upstairs and on the stage and all around, and we often remarked how happy you seemed to be in play week.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yes.
I think that's very important. I like to attend every evening, as you know, of the play. And one thing I always did in the last night, to which I give a lot of importance, was always to go backstage.
Yes.
Because it seemed to me that the actors on the stage they got their full meed of applause. They did a very good job, as you know. They enjoyed it, no doubt. People enjoyed telling them how well they had done. While, on the other hand, backstage, there were people like yourself and Roberta McCrae with the costumes, Bill Smith, Harry Neal, the rest, not to mention, of course, Herbie Carson himself, but lots of people who were doing a lot of work, and a lot of the girls and the boys too, dealing with costumes and all the other odd jobs. And I always made a special point of going round on that last night, even, and you probably remember this, crawling below the stage in the old assembly hall, where we had only about 3 feet, as you probably, even less than that, and one literally, crawl is almost too good a word. One had to lie full length to go round, and I felt that those people who were working so hard there should know that someone saw them.
Yes, yes. Well, we did. We always appreciated you coming backstage to see us, and the pupils did as well, because you always thanked them and congratulated them. Can you remember any play in particular which you liked?
All of them.
You liked all of them?
I know. Yes, all of them. But that's not a fair answer to your question. You're asking me really which play would I put number one? Which play appealed to me? And I'm just giving you a very quick off-the-cuff answer, because I think that's probably the best sort of answer to that question. I remember very much The Long Sunset.
Oh yes, that was very early on, wasn't it?
It was. That was about, in the late 1950s, probably 57, 58.
56, 57, actually, for it was the year I was away.
Right, oh,
I think that's right.
Well, that's not the reason why I remember it, of course. I suppose the reason really is that it was about Roman Britain. Yes. Which...
that was Mr. Roy.
No, that was Herbie Carson.
Yes.
And, well, the other, if I could just mention too, the other one I think which sticks in my memory most would be Murder in the Cathedral.
Yes, I do remember that very well as well. Well, you showed great foresight in appointing Mr. Carson too and encouraging him. Yes. So, yes, you did. And
I won't tell you the whole story about his appointment, but I'll just say this, and I mustn't go too far here. Within a few minutes of beginning to interview Herbie Carson, I made up my mind that we must have this man. Yes.
Well, I replaced him too, you see. I have a connection there as well.
Yes.
And then he came back again, yes. Those two plays took place in the old Assembly Hall. And then we moved to the new facilities.
Yes.
And that was quite a step forward as well, wasn't it?
Oh, yes.
You didn't have any crawling about.
No. And it's much easier to move from one end of the Assembly Hall to the other end in connection with lighting and that sort of thing.
Yes. And then the guides, you encouraged the guides, and I was speaking to Miss Whiteman not very long ago. She was doing an article on the guides, and she said they became a very big company, and she paid you a tribute to with the encouragement you had given her. Do you remember going to camp?
I do, yes.
Yes. And Mrs.
I remember
baked
particularly
cake.
going down to Ballycastle camp, where I think it had thundered and lightened, and they had all the bad weather they could have had a night or two before. On the other hand, I can remember going to some other places where they enjoyed very good weather. It was always enjoyable to go down someday in July.
Yes, and Mrs. Maul baked a cake, and then you had a particular mug or something that they looked out for you, I think Mrs. Whiteman said. Maybe you don't remember that.
All I can remember is we always insisted on bringing some strawberries.
Yes, well, she must have forgotten the strawberries. Yes. And I think you encouraged the first foreign trip. Was that to Switzerland with Mr. Neal? There were exchanges before that, but I think that was the first foreign trip, was it?
As far as travel is concerned, of course, it really all begins with Harry Neal and Bill Smith.
Yes.
They were in the late 1940s, I suppose, 48, 49, something like that. They were keen cyclists, as you know. They were keen youth hostel members, and they thought there'd be a good idea. Once again, this same topic of the overall development of the individual. They took parties away on youth hosteling trips. that's really, I suppose, how travelling began. As far as, and of course, first of all was Northern Ireland, then it was a bit further afield. I'm not sure, we'd have to look up the magazine to find out just where they went on the first trip. I can remember a trip to Holland, and I can certainly remember a trip to Switzerland. Which came first, I'm not sure.
I think Switzerland came first because Jack was on that, my brother.
Right.
And I've McLean, and
Righto.
Miss Armstrong, and
Yes.
Miss Whiteman,
Right.
and Mr. Smith, and it was not very long after wartime because I think they had difficulty getting food
Yeah,
at the
indeed.
railway stations, and
Yes.
things were quite difficult on that, but they
Yeah.
enjoyed it, you know. But I
Yes,
think it was,
yes,
I
yes.
think Switzerland was the first. I was on a Holland one later on.
Yes,
But
yes,
I think
yes,
that was.
yes.
Well, you didn't travel very much yourself, although you encouraged it, did you? At that time,
No.
you travelled later on.
Yeah.
You spent a lot of time in the summer about school, didn't you?
Yes.
Yes, yes. And was that doing the timetable, if I remember right?
Largely. Yes. Yes.
Well, you were very interested always in games
Yes.
and
Yes.
athletics. Your father was a
Yes.
starter in
He
athletics.
was very keen in athletics too.
Yes. And were you a cricket fan?
You should really have asked that question to Mr. Greenwood.
Yes, well, I was wondering about
And
that.
you know the answer I would
Yes.
have got. I was keen really on all games. I was more keen on athletics
Yes.
than cricket, largely because of my family upbringing. My
Yes,
father had
mine
always been
too.
interested in
Yes.
athletics, and I think Tom would probably have told you that cricket suffered at the hands of athletics.
Yes.
I think Desmond Allen would probably tell you that was equally unfair, just as I'm
That's
telling
right.
you too.
Yes.
And fair enough, of course, for Tom to say that. But, well, I knew a bit more about athletics, and I suppose that showed through.
Yes. Well, you must have very nice memories of the twice we went to Ravenhill in the
Yes.
rugby.
Yes.
I do, anyway.
Yes, everybody has.
Yes, I
Yes.
think I could have stood up or sat and cried actually one period of time of that.
Yes.
But have you any other memories of wins we had or even defeats? Can you remember
there's so
anything?
many, you know,
Yes,
but
I'm sure there are.
see, the trouble is that we're going back a long time now, and all these memories are buried deep in the subconscious now,
Mhm.
and only some odd little happening tends to bring them forward. Oh, well, just once again off the cuff, maybe I'll scrub this later on,
Yes.
but off the cuff, I have one memory which Desmond Allen will enjoy if he sees it, so make sure that he sees it. I think it was probably the year after we won the Schools Cup. That would be 1973, I think. We were playing Regent House School in one of the early rounds, I think in the second round, or it might have been quarter-final, something like that. Playing them at home here. And the game went on, and we reached the stage when we all knew the game was just about to end. And Regent House were leading. I think they were leading 8-6, a score like that. It's probably all recorded somewhere in the magazine. And the referee, at one stage, someone gave a forward pass or something of the kind. Referee blew his whistle. I think everybody thought the game was over. I was standing talking to Bill Maguire, who was the headmaster of Regent House School at that time. So naturally I turned and congratulated him. But then we discovered that the referee had not blown the final whistle. He had blown for another scrum because of the forward pass or whatever it was. We won the ball in that scrum. It came back to Adrian Goodrich, who promptly dropped a goal.
Oh.
From about halfway, but the halfway line. It was a marvellous drop goal. But it meant that instead of being beaten 8-6, we had won by 9-8 or whatever the difference in the score was. Desmond Allen saw all this happen and didn't let me forget it.
While you're talking, I'm just thinking of last night. I'm doing a reunion of 72.
Yes.
Find Diana Gibson's here, she
Yes.
once went on.
Yes.
And I had Trevor Montgomery and Michael Burton and James Perry.
That is the year we won the cup.
Yes,
Mhm.
with Trevor. I had such a pleasant evening. They're such fine people.
Yes.
Really. You
Yes.
might be proud to be there. It was
Yes,
lovely.
yes, yes.
So just when you mentioned that, Trevor was talking about the rugby. So he's a fine big man now.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
yes.
indeed. Right, we'll move on a wee bit to music then. You said you enjoyed the music.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
I like music. I like
Yes.
listening to music. Although, as I say, No musical talent whatsoever. Ask my wife if you like.
Yes, yes. Well, you always organised us very well for the concerts anyway. Do you remember we used to have those meetings before it and get everybody onto the stage, off the stage?
Chalking out the amount of space the orchestra needed and so on and so on.
Yes.
Well, someone had to...
take charge. Was there any concert that you especially remembered?
Again, just, you see, as I say, these things are buried away down, and just the odd question, I hope I'm
this is
giving
what
it
we want.
one here. These are off the cuff.
Yes, that's what we want.
You know, if you tell me later on that I said that the most important event that happened at the concert was so-and-so, I'll deny it heartily.
Yes.
But you have just mentioned one thing,
yes.
and what suddenly occurred to me, two things. First of all, the year that Jane Grey, Lady Jane Grey, as Tom used to call her, was taking part, I remember that concert particularly. There was the, what was it? Not the Woodpecker's song. You know better than I do.
You don't mean Gordon McElroy, no?
No, but...
Was that the Victoriana song? Or was that the one that she did?
That was the Victoriana one, yes.
Yes.
That is correct.
Because that's the one I have written down. I was going to say that's the one I remember. But then Jane Grey and the boy that she was going round with, what was the name? They did a thing out of the opera, do you remember?
Yes.
Which was very impressive too. But I don't think it was the same year. Or maybe it was. But that Pat Whitley and that lot
I remember Jane Grey particularly. But I also remember, and it wasn't she who sang the song.
Somebody was her...
One of the boys sang, is it the Woodpecker's song or... Anyhow,
yes,
that's one I remember. And of course I do remember the occasion.
It was the Birdcatcher's song.
The Birdcatcher's song.
It was Gordon McElroy.
Right, yes.
With the thing in his back.
I think that was the same year. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
That just comes to memory. I thought that was an excellent... I thought the programme that you all arranged, the sort of programme you arranged at that time was excellent.
Yes.
Very often one goes to a musical concert and you find that part two is simply a mirror image of part one. You get the same sort of mixture. You and Tom, I think, more than anybody else between you, and with a lot of help from Herbie Carson too, put a lot of thought into this and made sure that part two was a very different sort of programme from part one, which I thought was a very good approach indeed.
Yes, and it was never too long.
No. The other one that I am remembering, two others, they keep on coming up.
Yes,
you see.
good.
The time when the choir sang the Benjamin Britten's
carols.
Christmas,
Ceremony of Carols.
Ceremony of Carols, yes.
That was in the paper the other week.
Yeah, it was indeed.
Yes.
And the other one I remember was the Carmen of Burana.
Yes, it was very good too. Yes, I enjoyed that very much as well.
Possibly again in my own case because of the Latin context there.
Yes. Those were very pleasant evenings, weren't they?
They were indeed. Well, they were all very pleasant. As I say, I wouldn't like to imply for a moment that they were superior to all the others. They were all very good.
But just
indeed.
things you do remember.
Well, what always struck me was that the way in which we could hold packed night after night proved that
and it came through on the wireless and everything. People seem to hear about it.
Yes.
And have you seen the film of the knocking down of the old school? I don't know, I've written it down. It just came to my mind. Have you seen that film at all?
No, I haven't. A film was made of it?
Yes, Walter made a film of it.
Walter, I don't think Walter...
Isn't that right, Walter?
Yeah. You lent me once the
destruction of the old school, isn't that right?
No, you haven't seen
Tom Greenwood's tip, but
I must let you have it sometime.
I'd like to see it. Yes.
I don't want to dwell on it, but did you still think of the old school as the academy, or did you see, for years I didn't think of the new school as the academy until it was knocked down for Marks and Spencer's. The academy was still, to me, as I went home.
Yes.
And after it was knocked down, then but you completely immersed yourself in the new school, I would think.
I think the answer to that is the answer that John Kyle, our chairman, gave so often. At the time when the new school was being built, and after it was built for a few years, people kept on talking about the new academy,
Yes.
which is a phrase that always annoyed him.
Yes.
He always said, it's not a new academy.
Yes.
It's the same old academy. It happens to be in a different place.
Yes.
It happens to be in different buildings, but it's the same old school.
Yeah.
And I think there's a real truth there, and that's the way I felt about it.
Yes. See, you had the honour of being in both.
Yes.
And I had to.
Yes,
and
yes,
I felt it
yes.
was an
Yeah.
honour to
Mhm.
to serve in both.
Yes.
Yes. And you enjoyed the school parties.
Oh, very much.
Yes, and Mrs. Moore was always very supportive too. And
Yes, yes,
she was
yes.
very supportive in all
Yes.
that we did, really.
Yeah, yeah.
And do you remember the kindergarten party and the pouring out of the tea? And then it's quite changed now.
And
It's so noisy now.
and Sergeant Brown doing Santa Claus.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And Sergeant Brown teaching them how to dance.
Yes, indeed. Yes, yes,
All right. And the CU,
yes.
you felt that it played an important role in the
Oh,
school?
very much. Again, the first day that I started in the academy, what would it have been? The 19th of November, I think it was. Now, that was my first day in the school. I
Yeah.
came at that time. And that afternoon, early that morning, Miss McCarroll came to see me and said, look, we're arranging a squash for this afternoon. We'd like very much if you would come. Now, I hadn't the slightest idea what a squash was.
Yes.
I soon discovered. And so the very first afternoon, I attended that squash with the CU, and I think Miss McCarroll did a tremendous job. Miss
She
McCarroll
did.
and all the other people
Yes.
who
Still
did
are
a
doing.
tremendous
Mhm.
amount helping on that side of school activity.
Mhm.
And I don't need to tell you how much time she spent as well.
Yes. Well, you certainly spent a lot of time about school. Did you find that school day long? Because you came to nearly all the clubs. I mean, you came to the Modelling Society, which I was involved in for a wee while. You came to Walter's. What was it, Walter? Your
Model Club.
Your
Model
Model
Club,
Club.
yes.
I mean, did you find it long, the school day long?
I suppose arithmetically it was long, but it was certainly not tedious.
No.
It was not long in that particular sense. Once again, I always felt that if people were, pupils and teachers were engaged in school activities, I couldn't be everywhere, but I
Yes.
should be in as many places as possible.
Yes. Oh, good.
It's much the same sort of idea as I had about those who were helping behind the stage
Yes.
in
Well, did you
dramatic
take
work.
much work home with you?
Yes. Mhm.
Yes. And how did you relax, or did you relax?
I suppose that's the
Did you
answer.
go
At the
for
end of
walks,
at the
or-
end of the day, I slept.
Did you? You were a good
I-
sleeper.
Yes, at that particular time.
Yes.
I've been very lucky. I had the best
Well,
of
you
good
are
health.
very lucky. Yes, I was
yes.
just, I've written down here, you weren't absent many days like myself. We've had both good, I had one, but we have both
Yes,
good records. We can touch thumbs over that.
Yes, indeed, yes. Well, this sounds like boasting, and it's only just come up, but, well, you can cut it out later on if you like, or I might cut it out. I was a pupil at Methodist College. I
Yes.
missed no days.
No.
I taught there for 10 years in the academy, and apart from family bereavements, I missed no days.
No. That's excellent. But it's great to have had that
Yes.
privilege to be so healthy,
I
or
was
to
very
have such
lucky
good
indeed.
health. Yes.
And I've been extremely lucky, of course, all my retired life now.
Yes, yeah.
I've known too many people, we've all known far too many people who worked hard in their particular professions
Yes.
and looked forward to retirement,
Yes.
and then a year or two before retirement or a year or two after, they had a serious illness and
Yes.
didn't enjoy it as much as they should have done, didn't live very long. As we said at the beginning, I've had 20 years.
Yes. Well, did you enjoy having visitors to the school? Because
Yes.
anybody who came, I always enjoyed showing them around.
Yes.
It's never been
Yes.
a
Yes.
chore of any kind.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah,
did
yeah.
do you remember any visitors more than others, or visitors on speech days, or?
Yeah. Again, of course, I remember a lot of people, and again, an off-the-cuff answer.
Yes.
I'm deliberately not putting too much thought
No,
into these
no,
things,
no.
simply because I don't want to
No,
give the impression
no.
that
One
any
thing was more
particular-
important.
Yes, but one particular person who springs to mind right away was what was his first name? John Carson's elder brother, who was a surgeon in Birmingham, who presented the prizes somewhere, I think, in the 1950s. What was his first name? John Carson, the builder, and Robert Carson, the dentist. Do you remember both of them?
Yeah, I do remember.
Yeah.
Robert Carson was my dentist for a while. I was just trying to remember the man who came.
Yes. Now, I remember him particularly because I remember particularly, one wonders why you remember these things. Just as why do you remember someone who comes along and says, "How do you do? I was at school 30 years ago," and you remember him immediately, and someone else comes up and you haven't the slightest idea who it is.
Yes.
I think it's probably got something to do with the degree of consciousness at the time one last saw these people.
Yes.
And I can still remember the address, which I wish I could remember his name. It wasn't Robert, it wasn't John, those are the two brothers, and anyhow, I still remember the address that he gave to the pupils.
Yes.
That's one I remember particularly. I remember, of course, very specially too, because I thought it was excellent, the address that Dorothy Simpson, yes, gave at the last prize distribution. That was just a couple of months ago,
yes.
as you know, a few months ago. I remember a lot of people, of course, who came. There was also someone called Vic. My memory's going,
I think your memory's excellent. There's nothing wrong with it at all.
Well, there was a man called Vic.
Oh yes, Vice Chancellor of Queen's.
No, although I do remember. I remember him too. No, this was an old pupil of the school.
Yes.
Who came and presented the prizes, and I remember a lot of them. I don't.
Paula McBride, I remember
Paula
very
McBride,
well.
exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
If only because of the uniform.
It was, and her hair. She
yes.
I remember that very well.
And I remember too having to rush off to Aldergrove with her immediately after,
Yes.
because even though she was, I think, head of the service at the time, she had to be back pretty fast.
Yes.
And Miss Kyle and I went across to Aldergrove with her to see her on the plane.
Yes.
I think at about 7 o'clock after the prize distribution.
Yes. I think it was, we hadn't had many ladies. Maybe she was the first lady we had.
Well, she wasn't the first, because I can remember there was a member of Parliament way back in 1946-47, Irene Calvert.
Oh yes, well I wouldn't have been at school then, yes.
But I think you're probably right. I think probably we had
She
no
was
ladies.
the first old pupil lady.
Yes, indeed
so.
she would be, and I think she was probably the first lady since that time.
Mm-hmm. Well then, you were involved with the new university, did you?
Yes.
That was an exciting time for you?
It was, yes. It was obvious at that particular time. Higher education was developing very much. A lot of new universities, a number of new universities had been opened in England and over in Scotland too. And there was obviously a very wide field to be explored there. I think some people made the mistake of thinking that the Lockwood Committee, of which I was a member, was concerned only with the planning of the new university. It wasn't, of course, it was the whole of higher education. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the best things that we did was to propose the foundation of what was known as the Ulster College, which was intended to be a technological institute, and such institutes were regarded at that particular time as being something lower than universities. Now, of course, the University of Ulster, as is now known, is really an amalgamation of that Ulster College with the new University of Ulster, which I think has been the correct development. Mm. But it was quite an exciting time.
Well, it was different for us because until that time I don't think you ever were away from school.
And was that noticed?
And you had to be away a certain amount.
Yes.
And of course Mr. Preston looked after things very well,
Yes,
but it was the only time I think that you really were, for any length of time.
I suppose so. You see, the committee consisted of one half of its members were Northern Irish, the other half were cross-channel, and we decided very early that there was no point in meeting just every Friday afternoon for 3 or 4 hours, because the next Friday afternoon you would start where you'd halfway through what you'd done the previous week, and at the end of it all you were no further on. So that we decided that we would meet Thursday, Friday and Saturday. So we start on a Thursday morning, worked through Thursday, worked through Friday, worked through part of Saturday anyhow, so that the actual travelling would seem to be less of a burden than it would have been if we had been travelling all that distance every week.
Yes.
And that was deliberately the plan. So I used to go away on a Wednesday night and come back on Saturday evening.
Yes.
And I suppose it never sort of occurred to me that I was away from school.
No, well, it was just different for us, I suppose.
Yes. When the cat's away.
Yeah, well, we didn't do anything wrong, but we noticed that it was the only time that you ever had been away much from school because you were very conscientious about being there.
I suppose that's true enough.
Yes.
Mm.
Now, would you have any memories that I haven't touched on that you'd like to tell us about?
Oh.
Or anything that would give you pleasure to tell us? Or
Oh, indeed, no. Well, of course, all sorts of memories. A lot of them trivial, some of them important, naturally. Some sad, some amusing. One occurs to me just because it happened within the first few weeks. Another of these things which I'm never allowed to forget. I started here, as I say, in November 1945, 19th of November, and of course a few weeks later we ran into the Christmas season with all the usual Christmas parties. And at that particular time the Old Pupils' Reunion was the last of the parties held in the Christmas week. And it took the form at that stage of a whist drive, followed by a dance in between the annual general meeting of the association. That was the arrangement. So that I was attending my first Old Pupils annual reunion about 3 weeks after I arrived, playing whist. It was progressive whist, where the people who win move from the table and the people who lose stay where they are, move around a little bit. On one occasion my partner and I must have won the game because I moved on to another table, and there were two people sitting there, an old pupil whom I got to know, became a very good friend of mine very much later on. And just as I arrived, I heard him, he was looking around, and I heard him saying to the person who had been his partner, "Well, I don't see him anywhere, I'm sure he must be here." And as I sat down, something more was said, and I gathered that who they were looking for was the new headmaster.
Oh, yes.
I saw the opportunity for an interesting conversation, but very quickly I confessed.
Yes.
And Sam, and you probably know who I'm referring to now, who later became a distinguished headmaster, has never let me forget that.
Yeah.
Memories. Of course, the sad memories. Joe Little.
Yes.
Do you remember Joe?
Yes, I do. In the clock.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, he was killed in a bicycle accident. Lay for over 100 days in the Waveney Hospital.
That's right.
And of course, plenty of pleasant memories, important memories. The day we moved into the new building, of course, naturally is one that I still remember. We had told everyone, of course, back at the beginning of the previous May that we were moving in. And when letters went out with the term reports, with lists of books and everything else, arrangements were laid out about the changeover. About the beginning of August, the builders said to me, "You'll never be in here on the 1st of September." And I said, "We will, and it's up to you." And there it is. Well, I won't go into, there were difficulties, undoubtedly, as there always are. But I couldn't help feeling that whenever we moved in, there would be difficulty. And it would have been very difficult, in fact, to change back to Thomas Street because we had already brought a lot of our equipment and various other things. So the net result, of course, was that on that day that we moved in, we were picking our way round cables and piles of bricks and paint pots and everything else. But at the end of the day, I remember speaking to John Montgomery and saying, "Well, that didn't go too badly." John agreed. John was a great help, of course, in all matters of that kind. And that day sticks in the memory.
Yes. I remember one of my favourite days was the new open day, the first open day we had in the new school. I thought that was a most enjoyable day.
Yes.
With the concert and the drama in the hall. And
yes.
It really was a most enjoyable day.
Oh yes, that very memorable day. That was in February 1968. Mm-hmm. Not only that one day, because you may remember that the official opening by the Governor of Northern Ireland, by Lord Erskine, was held on the afternoon of the Friday.
Yes.
But we couldn't at all accommodate everybody who wanted to come, because we couldn't even accommodate all the parents in addition to everyone else. Mm-hmm. So we had then an open evening on both the Friday evening and the Saturday evening, at which we broadcast the Governor's opening speech. Mm-hmm. Again, the sort of little thing that springs to mind in this connection, I remember calculating afterwards that we had served 2,000 cups of tea, because everyone who came to any one of those three functions got a cup of tea, if nothing else. But indeed, on a more serious note, it was one of the occasions where I really felt a great amount of pleasure, from the point that there was a real feeling that everybody who was there really had a sense of belonging to the school. They were really very happy and very content and satisfied that here we were in this fine new school. Yes. And I carried away that sense, and it certainly gave me a lot of pleasure.
I'm sure it did. I'm sure it did. You've done a lot of work to bring it about. And have you been glad that the dice cast you in Ballymena?
Yes, indeed. When I was in school, you see, I had no family connection with, well, you know where my father came from. Mm-hmm. My mother was County Down. Yes. So Ballymena was a place that never came to my thoughts when I was young. Although the one little point of contact, my best friend in college was John Beaumont.
Oh.
You probably remember the Beaumont family.
Yes, you do. Francis,
well, but my first appointment was in Coleraine, as you may know, for a year, and then I was in Methodist College for 10 years. It never really occurred to me that Ballymena would be the place where I would end up. But when the vacancy arose and I applied and I was appointed, well, I felt Ballymena was probably a better place than most. Yes. Knowing the reputation of the school at that particular time. And looking back then, I certainly do not regret coming here. As you realise, when we retired, we had two choices: either back to Belfast on the plea that blood is thicker than water, and that's where all our relations are, or staying in Ballymena, where we know far more people than we know in Belfast. I don't think we ever really decided to stay in Ballymena. We just, like all the pupils that I used to find fault with for not making up their minds, we drifted. Yes. And again, we haven't had a moment's regret. No.
Well, it must be very gratifying for you to see all your splendid work being continued.
Yes. Yes.
It must be, to be able to visit the school and such high standards being maintained.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Again, a little thing that comes to mind: the first governors' meeting that we held, that would be the meeting in September 1967. We had moved into the school 1st September 67, and the first meeting of the governors was the end of September. And one of the items on the agenda, which I brought up, was a proposal that we needed 3 further extensions. Some of the governors looked at me, and you can guess what they said: "Will you never be pleased?" To which my answer simply was that we had moved there. It was not the end of anything. There was still room for development. There were 3 different physical lines of development which were really required, all of which, of course, have come to pass in the meantime, and others as well. Yes. I had a good feeling, you see, that the school was certainly not at the end of the road by any means.
Well, it's maybe presumptuous of me to thank you for all you've given to the school, Mr. Maughan.
Oh, thank you very much indeed.
And it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I hope we haven't tired you too much.
Well, you haven't tired me too much, and the risk, you see, to begin with, you know what I told Walter to start, the risk, you see, on these occasions is that now that you get your victim started.
Yes,
It's difficult
yes.
to get them stopped. However, thank you very much indeed for your kind words and for the very kind way in which you have conducted it. I have enjoyed it.
Yes, I
and
have
thanks very
enjoyed it
much
too.
for what you have said.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I
Any other
don't.
memories or anything that you would like to recall?
I don't think so at the moment. I should have done
I
more
just-
preparation, I suppose.
No,
but,
no, I just don't want to
yeah.
go on too long because I
Yeah.
think maybe you're
No.
tiring yourself.
Yeah.
You know, but
No, I think really, if you have got what
yes,
you
yes,
want, I
we've
think
come.
I'd
All
be
right.
satisfied.
Right, thank you very much.
Well, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.